This might be the most famous steak tutorial ever. Gordon Ramsay shows us how to cook the perfect steak in a ripping hot pan with a little bit of salt, pepper, oil, butter, garlic, basting, and then resting. And more than 36 million people watched it. But it's 13 years old, and I want to know if this is still the way to cook the perfect steak, or that this method can do a little update. First, we're going to watch the whole video together. Then we're going to cook the steak exactly the way Gordon Ramsay did it. No changes and no tricks. Then I'm going to do a taste test, and I'm going to see if I can improve on the method or that it's just the king forever. Then together we're going to find out if we can make this steak even better, or that this is still the golden standard. I was doom scrolling the internet again, and I hooked up in one of those steak algorithmy things where you just keep on getting juicy steaks like I wasn't hungry already. And I kept coming back to the Gordon Ramsay steak tutorial, and it's just a really good classic way to cook a steak. And it's just really amazing how fast he talks and how fast he goes and how much information he spurs out over you, talking about steaks like it's nothing. And if you skip a step, wow, you might mess up the whole thing, right?
Where's the lobster?
Funny enough, this video has been around for 13 years already, and it's still going strong. And it's basically, well, the how-to. Why would you even go to chef school if you can just watch Gordon Ramsay videos, right?
What are you doing, Melinda?
Yeah, not everybody agrees with him, but he is what chefs are and how chefs cook steak. So if you order a steak in a restaurant, most likely the chef that cooks it for you, well, cooks it the way Gordon Ramsay does it. Well, hopefully. I wish they would. Yeah. But somehow I have the feeling that it's a little bit more difficult than just doing it like Gordon Ramsay does. So here's the plan. We're going to go through that video step by step, checking out how he does it and what the trick is to get it right.
Hot pan.
Let's go, Gordon.
Secret here is to
Hot
make
pan.
sure that-
People think this is not important, but that hot pan, it changes everything. If you have your pan cold or too hot, it's going to ruin everything. But what you got to figure out is like, you're going to take a hot pan, and that means you're going to leave it on the fire at about 70% of the power. So you're not going to turn your gas stove all the way up. You're not going to turn your electricity stove all the way up, at about 70%. And then you're going to give that pan time to completely heat up. What's that? And that takes a couple of minutes. So you're gonna give it about 3 to 4 minutes for the heat to spread out through the pan, and that way it's going to be even throughout with the same heat. And that is what he means with a hot pan. He just doesn't mean just throw it on full throttle and let the smoke alarms go off.
Season it first. Beautifully done. Get some nice large grains of pepper.
I don't know if you catch that, but he actually had a flaky salt on. So you saw him put on a lot of salt. That's either gonna be like a light sea salt that is flaky. There's something like this, a really light flaky sea salt. Because if this, like this little particle melts, see that? That pyramid, that melts, and it's just very smooth. Basically, the pepper is optional. Some people argue that you're going to be burning your pepper, so don't put on any pepper and just put it on at the last minute.
To make sure you take them out of the fridge 20 minutes before you actually start cooking.
Gordon Ramsay says take the steak out 20 minutes before you're going to cook them. He wants the steaks to come to room temperature. This has actually been tested and it doesn't work. If you have your steaks on a cutting board, on a wooden cutting board, that's not going to work. However, if you have your steaks on a stainless steel platter in a restaurant, that is going to work a lot faster because the stainless steel is just going to, well, basically going to load that steak up with warmth from the kitchen. And especially in restaurants, that works really well. For home cooks, this is not going to work as well. So you either got to think about taking it out an hour before, and then you have to worry about food safety again. So yeah, this is an argument that could be had with Gordon Ramsay. I'm not gonna take that argument up with Gordon Ramsay, but you could have that argument. I don't know.
Touch of oil in, all that round.
Oil in, that is 3 tablespoons of oil. That is not a touch of oil. That is going to be frying amounts of oil in the pan.
That's the kind of noise you want to hear in the pan every time.
That's true. We need that sizzle. So, what he says is important. Within 30 seconds, I see a crust building up. If you don't see it within 30 seconds, take the steak out, get the pan up to temperature. So that is your sign that you're not doing it right. You either have it too cold, but you can also have it too hot. If you see blue smoke coming in and you get these, well, basically heavy qualms of heat and smoke, then you know your pan's too hot. At that time, you're also going to take the steak out, let the pan cool down a little bit, and start over. Just take the steak out, start over. You haven't screwed it up yet. It's going to be the moment you're going to be saving that steak, if you're not in the right position with the heat of your pan.
On the back of the sirloin, you want to render that down as well. That's it there. So
it's a nice tip. Render down the fat. It's the most enjoyable thing ever.
You're turning your steaks every minute. It starts to cook evenly.
Another vital tip. You know, he puts garlic in, great. But the vital tip, and he just mentions it, it's like it's the same thing as the garlic, but it's not. You gotta turn that steak regularly. Some people think that you gotta put that steak and just let it go and build up that crust. But if you want an even cooked steak, you need to turn it often just to build up the crust, but also at the same time cook the steak evenly. So you're gonna just every 30 seconds, you're gonna flip it, 15 to 30 seconds, and you're just gonna look at it and you're just gonna keep your eye on it, making sure that it doesn't cook on one side more than it does on the other side.
A little bit of thyme.
A little bit of thyme to go with that.
A touch more.
More oil. He's frying the steaks in the pan.
Medium is there, and well done is at the top of your wrist.
The way he explains how you know if your steak is good cooked, well, basically that only works if you cook about 100 steaks a day. If you are a chef and you cook a lot of steaks, you can do the trick with pinching here and pinching there and pinching here. It's not going to work for people that never cooked a steak before, or people that cook about, I don't know, 2 to 3 steaks a week. Personally, I wouldn't trust myself with hitting the right temperature, and I had a lot of practice. So it's very easy these days. You can just pick one of these thermometers up. This is mine, the chef's temp, and it's super simple to use. You just open it up, it has a pin, stick it in, and it will tell you the temperature, and the temperature that you are looking for is 50 degrees Celsius if you're cooking in a pan. Because, well, we'll get to that. But 50 degrees Celsius, that is the sweet spot. I'll tell you why later on.
I'm going to start off with my butter.
You gotta love butter. Man, butter on my steak, it just makes it so much better. I love steak, but butter on my steak. And again, he says nothing burning, but look at the fire underneath this pan. It's not hot. He probably reduced it a little bit because he now comes to another phase of the cook where he's adding butter, he's adding garlic, he's adding thyme, and that means he's basically also cooking herbs at the same time. So now he's not working on the crust anymore. He's just working on getting the steak actually cooked, and he probably took the fire down a notch just to let it go a little slower and just do it a little bit more gentle. I like that. Rub it in. Just make use of what you got. Work with it. Use the fat of the beef, put the garlic, rub it. Again, he goes so fast, but the steak comes off. So he probably at some point pinched it and figured out, well, it's done now. And he just takes it off and lets it rest. They don't show the rest, obviously, but he lets it rest. And I can't stress this enough. You need that rest. Remember, you're either pinching it like, wow, I want this, but this takes into consideration that you put it on a board, you let it rest, the temperature's still shooting up from the outside of the steaks where it's hotter, and then it goes in towards the steak, and you're pushing out a little bit of moisture from the steak, but once the steak's fully rested, it's going to soak up and it's just going to let all of the fat that's rendered just go back to its natural place, creating a beautifully juicy steak throughout the whole steak. I got all these questions that come with this video. Slice with a bread knife. Gordon.
Delicious.
Of course. Delicious. Now, you and me are going to make a steak of our own that I ordered so we can cut out our own steaks, and we're going to go through all of it step by step, the way Gordon Ramsay does it, but with a full explanation so you can actually do this, and we're going to figure out if this is still the king way to do it or if it needs an upgrade. Let's start with the steak. And I like to buy my steaks as a whole cut so I can cut them up exactly the way I want to. And in this case, exactly the way Gordon Ramsay cuts this up. But this is an exceptional, beautiful entrecote in one piece. It's got a beautiful dark red meat and a good amount of intermuscular fat, so this steak is going to be very tasty, but very juicy at the same time. Now, important to note is that we got a little fat cap laying on top of this meat. Not too much, but still plenty of fat to melt down and help with the flavor of the steak. I'm going to cut my steak exactly how Gordon Ramsay had it, and that's about 2 fingers thick, a little thinner, because if you want to cook them in a pan, and this is important, don't buy your steaks too thick and don't buy them too thin. If you buy them too thin, they're going to be cooked way too fast without building up a crust, and if you cook them too thick, you're not going to be just pan searing, you also need to add another step. So this is important. So about 1.5 fingers thick, that is going to be perfect. First steak, and there we go, the second steak and the perfect steak. And please note the amount of intermuscular fat that we got in this steak. That's going to make it very juicy, very tender, and very tasty. This steak is called the striploin steak and sits on the back of the beef. And the cool thing now is that I've got this roast here, and I can actually cut steaks for my next session. So I'm just going to keep on cutting, I'm going to vacuum seal them, and I'm going to put them in my freezer, and whenever I need one, I'm just going to take one out. Now, of course, pans are important too. Gordon Ramsay uses a pan with a plastic handle and well, I don't know what kind of pan he uses, but you can see that it's a more high quality pan that's a little bit heavy duty. And he uses that for a good reason, because he wants energy in his pan. Let me explain what I mean. If you have a really thin pan, like a wok, let's say, that's about the thinnest pan you can get, then you're relying on the fire to heat up the pan constantly. But if you put something cold in the pan, it will just take away all the energy that sits in the pan. So for a wok, that's great, because it means you have a lot of control over high and low temperatures. But Gordon Ramsay's cooking steak at a stable temperature. That's why he wants a thicker pan. I do not have the exact same pan that he does, but I think I have something that might be a little better. You see, this is the Pitmaster X cast iron pan. And it's not just a cast iron pan, it's hand polished and has a mirror-like finish. Not only does that make it super shiny on the inside, but it also makes it super smooth and hard for food to stick to the bottom. It comes in a variant that has a handle, but you can also get one with 2 smaller handles if you like to cook in a barbecue or in the oven. But the basic point is that it's going to do exact the same thing as Gordon Ramsay does, just slightly better. Oh my God, I'm out of gas. Yep. So like I said before, you cannot use just full power, put the pan on, and expect everything to be fine, because it's not going to be fine. You see, you need that constant power of energy spreading throughout the pan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it down a notch and take it back to about 70% of the burner. And this is not specific to every burner. And it's going to be fine. No, you gotta look at the fire. Look at it. How much energy are you putting in? Are you cooking electric? How much energy is going to go in your pan? And especially if you're using cast iron pans like this, they will just eat up the energy, eat up the heat, becoming hotter every single minute. And that is why I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. And in the meantime, I have some work to do, because it's time to do the preparations. And in case you didn't figure this out yet, Gordon Ramsay had everything set up before he started. And once he actually started cooking the steaks, well, it looked like it wasn't a really hard job to do. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is season my steaks with the exact same salt that Gordon uses, which is the flaky sea salt. And just like Gordon Ramsay, I'm going to put on some ground pepper. Let's do a flip. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. The rest of the ingredients, of course, are olive oil, some butter, and I've got here some fresh thyme from the garden that I can put in, and a clove of garlic. And I can see my pan is starting to hot, but better yet, if I hold my hand above the pan for about, well, the thickness of the steak, I can definitely feel the radiation heat. Let's put in some olive oil, and don't be too shy with your olive oil, because Gordon Ramsay likes to fry his steak. Then the steak goes in, pointing it away from you. Listen to the sound. You want to hear that sizzle, and that is exactly what we need. Now we also need contact between the steak and the pan. So just give it a little push. Make sure that the steak contacts the pan on all places. Let that oil swirl through the pan. And you see, this is a non-stick cast iron pan. That steak is not connecting to anything. After about 30 seconds, you're going to give it a flip. You can see that we're getting a lot of caramelization on the steak, but we're nowhere near it being cooked. But that doesn't matter. You don't need to have the perfect sear instantly on one side. We want to cook that steak even, so I need to flip it frequently to make sure that we get an even cook. The crust is starting to look really good. So now I'm going to shift my focus to rendering down that little fat cap right there. And I think this is something that Gordon Ramsay has absolutely right, because if you're not rendering down that small fat cap that sits on the side of the steak, then you're basically missing out, because all of that fat is flavor, and it's much more enjoyable to cook really well seared fat. Now, we got the crust, the fat's rendered down, and I think this is where Chef Gordon Ramsay missed a step. Not that he didn't do it, but I think he didn't mention it. We're taking that fire down a lot lower, because we're basically been cooking with olive oil, and if we just keep cooking with olive oil, it doesn't matter. But now we want to add butter to the mix, and that means we want a lot lower temperature for that butter not to burn. So let's put in some butter and make sure that you're using plenty of butter. If you want to spoon butter around in a pan, you got to have lots of it. And I'm adding the thyme. I wanted to say it's going to pop up a little bit because of the moisture that sits in the thyme. And I'm going to add a clove of garlic for the flavor. Here comes the tricky part, because now you have to determine, like, when is my steak done? It looks good. Is it cooked now, or isn't it cooked? I'm just turning it around, hoping that I did a good job. So let's take the guesswork out of it and just use a thermometer. It makes things very much more simple. And I can see that we're already to the point where I think, wow, this is already way done. It has a core temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. I'm going to take it off and let it rest on a cutting board. And that is going to take at least as long as you cook the steak. So personally, since it's a warm day today, I'm going to give it about 5 minutes. But thanks. But if you're at home in your kitchen and it's about 20 degrees Celsius, just leave it on the countertop for 5 to 10 minutes. And if you're even thinking that it's cooling down a little bit too much, just put a little bit of tin foil over it. I think the results speak for themselves. We got a beautiful crust. We got a cooked steak that has like a medium rare to it. It looks absolutely delicious. It's also juicy and it's tender. Let's do the taste test. Oh. Yeah. So, is that the perfect steak that Gordon Ramsay makes? Well, in my opinion, this is the go-to method to make steak at home. But saying it's perfect, yeah, it's not really perfect. You see here on the side, we've got gray edges. And steak freaks are gonna say, well, gray edges, why are we gonna have those gray edges? Do we really want it? Personally, I don't mind having gray edges. It comes with cooking in a pan, and you can't do without it. However, I would like to try, hello? Why am I down there? However, I would like to try to see if I can make this steak just a little bit better. Just a little bit, well, more like Guga would do it. Like a reverse sear steak method. Don't get me wrong, it's delicious, but can it be better? It's a big question. The rest of the ingredients, of course, are olive oil, some butter, and I've got here some fresh thyme from the garden that I can put in, and a clove. I'm gonna fire up my Napoleon grill by putting in some briquettes, a fire starter, and then light it up until the briquettes are lit. Put my grill grates in, close the lid, and dial in the temperature to 120 degrees Celsius. Now, if you look carefully, you see that I put the steak on the opposite side of the fire. And that means we're gonna use a barbecue almost like an oven. Of course, with a little bit of smoke wood, that's going to give us some extra barbecue flavor. Of course, you got to keep your eye on the temperature again, because pinching and poking and whatever, it's not going to work. So you're going to either choose a wireless thermometer like this and stick it into your steak, or you're going to regularly, well, that uses an app, so it will notify you when your steak is done, or you're going to use something like this, and that is a probe thermometer. You're going to stick it in, so you got to open your barbecue, and it's going to get hotter, and temperature's going to run out of control. Yeah, so basically, you're going to use the wireless thermometer. You're just going to take it, put it in your steak, and that's it. It's going to track the temperature of the core of the steak. It's got loads of actual sensors inside one probe that measure the average of your steaks. There's lots of science involved, but just look at the app, set the temperature, you're good to go, and it will beep at you once that steak is done. And we're aiming for about 50 degrees Celsius, then we're taking it off. Okay, we gotta get a steak off. Look, hey, Gordon Ramsay steak look way better. That's right, Gordon Ramsay steak did look better. But now we're going into the resting phase because this is not done yet. We gotta just let this rest. But while we wait, I'm gonna put a little bit of butter on it, just a little bit extra, like, because butter is flavor. And I already seasoned it with salt and pepper in the beginning with the other steaks. So there we go, a little bit of butter. Of course, we're gonna go both sides and we're gonna measure the temperature. I'm gonna show you the temp inside this steak. So I'm just gonna, look at that. Can you see that? 50 degrees Celsius. So this is actually what's happening. And I'm expecting it to go up by like maybe another degree or maybe another 2 degrees. So it's going to be 51 or 52, but it's going to be very close. But I'm just going to leave it on the board now. In the meantime, I'm going to put some extra charcoal in my Napoleon grill. Grill grates back in. Let them warm up together with the barbecue. And actually, we don't have to close the lid, but we have to make sure the bottom vent's all the way open so we get maximum amount of airflow, so we can have a maximum amount of heat. I'm talking about searing heat. Keep in mind that I got a hot zone here and a cold zone there, so I can move the steak away from the heat if I want to. Just like now, I got the sear mark on, and I'm going to do another sear mark, but that's just a little aesthetic. That's not actually building up any crust or doing anything good, other than making my steak look nice. Check that. But more important than the sear marks is the crust, of course. So I'm just going to do this for about 10 seconds. And this gives me a little bit of flavor, but not the flavor that I'm looking for. So again, the other side, look at that sear mark. Now I'm going to take my cast iron skillet, put it on, and I'm going to finish my sear there to get that beautiful crust. A little bit of oil, take in, and just let it build up a crust. If we take a look at this steak, you can see that there's almost no gray area. It's through and through pink. You got a beautiful crust, and it's even a little bit of a charred crust, which I personally prefer. And I think this is a very, very good looking steak and a very good method to never fail at cooking steaks. It's basically a version of cooking steaks with a lower skill level. For the Gordon Ramsay, you're gonna need some skills, especially if you don't use a thermometer, or if you don't know about temperatures and temperatures in your pan, and like you don't have experience, it could be a little tricky. But if you use this method, well, basically it's foolproof. You're using a thermometer and you're just waiting for the steak to be perfect and then make it look good. But what does it taste like? I must say, because the steak was laying in salt a little longer than the version that we did in Gordon Ramsay, because we did that first, the flavor of the steak is pronounced more. So personally, I recommend seasoning your steak 4 hours before you're going to cook. And I would really recommend using this method, because if you don't have a barbecue, you can also use an oven and then maybe not smoke, but you know, get the steak up to temperature first and then sear it off in your pan. Good idea? Let me know how you would approach this. What is your best way to cook a steak? And do you still think that Gordon Ramsay's version of cooking the perfect steak is still up to par this time in 2026? Let me know. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers. Until then, eet smakelijk. Boah, lekker hè? Should we feed the dog? We already have plenty of the last steak. Yummy.